Hello. Right. The main thing that I'm going to be doing today is answering any questions anybody has on well, on Saturday at least. If anybody came on, the people who came on Fridays and Saturdays did some maths. If you came on a Sunday and you didn't, you did something different. But on Saturday you did some maths and you had some maths homework, which everybody else on Sunday did the week before. So um, I'll answer any questions from this. After which, what I'm going to do is you all have a test this weekend, and I will be giving you some helpful pointers um, with regards to that test. That's what I will be doing. Um, yeah, I'm going to go through the things that I would recommend for the people in year nine, and then I'm going to literally have it open on another screen and tell you the things that I would recommend if you are in year nine slash year 10 in terms of the test that you will get this weekend. Um, some of it will overlap, but I'll do it separately. Right. Okay. So somebody asked me one question, which is question 14 from the Year 10 maths booklet, which I'll do since there's no other questions regarding the homeworks just yet. I presume most people are here because they want me to tell them about the test. Um, so I shall do that. Question 14 from the Year 10 booklet. 14 is that. Okay. Um, good question. Um, After in the year 10 test, can you do exam style like Saturday one? I don't know what that means. But I'm going to go through the things that you should know for the test that you have on Saturday. Um, right. I'll go through this question and I'll just go straight to the test stuff because again, I think that's why most people are here. This question says that there's a graph of two straight lines. Um, it tells you the equation of this line and it tells you the equation of this line. Okay, so the equation of this, let's make this colorful, the red line is y equals 15 minus 3x. The equation of this blue line is y equals 2x. Now, the thing to remember is that the equation of a line, I think of it as like a machine that tells you if you tell it an x coordinate on this line, it will tell you what the y coordinate is, or vice versa. So if you tell it a y coordinate, you can find out what the x coordinate is. For example, if I wanted to know on this line, what is y when x is 2, let's pretend x is 2 there, and I wanted to know, well, what is the y coordinate here, then I can put x equals 2 into where the x is, and it'll become 15 take away 3 times 2, 15 take away 6, which is 9. So that's what an equation of a line is, okay? Now, the first question says work out the coordinates of P, which is there. Now, this point here, because it's on this x-axis, what do we know about the x-axis? We know that the y coordinate is always 0. Anything that's touching this x axis, the y coordinate is 0. So if they want the, so the answer is already something 0. It's just I need to know what the x coordinate here is. In other words, how far across have we gone here? And you do that by, again, going to the equation of the line and changing the y to 0. And what you then need to do is rearrange this equation to get x equals. So if we add the 3x to the other side, you get 3x equals 15. If you divide by 3, you get x equals 5. So that becomes 5, 0 for that reason. Work out the coordinates of point Q. Now, point Q is where this line and this line meet each other. It's where they touch each other. When you have two equations, y equals 2x and y equals 15 minus 3x, and you want to know where they meet, what you just do is make these bits equal to each other. So because it's y equals and y equals, you can just say, well, that 2x equals this 15 minus 3x. And then you rearrange this to get x. So I'm going to add this 3x over to get 5x equals 15 and divide 15 by 5 to get x equals 3. That becomes my x coordinate of the answer. To get to the y coordinate, what you just do is put that back into either of the two equations. So 2 times 3 is 6. Therefore, that is 3, 6. Then it says, use your answer to A and B to work out the area of triangle OPQ. Right, this is triangle OPQ. There. Okay. What do we have these coordinates? That point was 5, and then this Q went up to the 6, didn't it? Okay. Yeah. So effectively, we have a triangle. If I just redraw the triangle, and I recommend you do this sometimes. There's the triangle. its base goes from 0 to 5. So it means it's 5 long at the bottom. And its height is however tall this point was, which we know was 6 from the previous question. How do you work out the area of a triangle? You do, so this is this question. You do a half times the base times the height. So that's 30, half of 30 is 15, and that will be the answer to that. Right, let me get through this last one. Year 9's 589C. 589C. Okay. Oh, horrible. Right. Work out the mean number of fish caught per hour in week one. Well, we caught 4 fish in 2.5 hours. So if I want to work out how many fish I caught per hour, wouldn't you just do 4 divided by 2.5? I think that's what you do. If I caught 4 fish in 2.5 hours, then I want to know how many I caught in per hour, then do 4 divided by 2.5, and you get 1.6. So that would be the answer to that. And Mark says, one of the fish I caught weighed 5 kg. In which week did this happen? Give a reason. Well, the answer is week 4. Quite a difficult one, that. So what they're saying is in which week did you catch a fish that weighed 5 kg? Well, it can't be week 2 because we only caught one fish and it was weighed 2.3 kg, so it's definitely not that. Um, could it have happened in week 1? Well, in week 1, the 4 fish we caught had a mean weight of 1.2. The way you do this, the long explanation for this, or the quick explanation is 4 times 1.2 gives you 4.8. That means that all of the fish that I caught in total weighed 4.8 kg. Then when I divided it by 4, I got this mean, which means that one of them couldn't have weighed 5, could it? That rules that out. If you do the same with this, 6 times 0.8 is 4.8, which means that all of these 6 fish, if you added their weights up, added up to 4.8 kg, which means, again, one of them could not have been 5 kg. But if we go to week 4 and you did 3 times 1.9, then the 3 fish I caught that week their weights added up to 5.7, which means that one of them could have weighed 5 kg, right? And the other two were just really small, light ones. So that works. So you'd say week 4, and the reason is my reason would just be that something like this, that 3 times 1.9 is 5.7. So that means that all of the fish weighed in total 5.7. So one of them could have weighed that. 8, 9C, I'll do the simultaneous equation question as well. 8, 9C, 8. Students in a class took a spelling test. Okay, frequency. So 2 people got 3 in the spelling test. 2 people also scored 4, and so on and so on. Lucy is one of the 29 students in the class. Her score was the same as a median. Work out her score. That's awkward. That's a hard question. Right, the median, if there's 29 students altogether, the median is wherever the 15th student is. Now, the first 2 students got a score of 3. The next 2 students got a score of 4. So that's 4 students altogether, if we put them in order. The next 4 students scored 5. So that's now 8 students altogether so far that I've counted. The next 7 students scored 6. So that means the 15th student, if we put them in order, must have scored 6. You're sort of cumulatively adding them up to get to halfway. And so I think it's 6. And then 9, right, 9C. I think I knew that somebody was going to ask this question. Right, a company is basically making these sweets and they say they contain 50 toffees. They're trying to check that they contain 50 toffees. Now, what they did to check if all of their bags produce 50 toffees is they used the first 11 bags produced each Monday and they checked them. But isn't that not great? Because firstly, only 11. What you should do is do it with a bigger sample. So you want to use more bags. And also, why just on a Monday? Why not spread it out throughout the week a little bit? And why just the first 11 bags? Why not do, every other bag or do you see what I mean? Like do quite a lot, spread it out a little bit more, but you can do the Monday instead. So why not do it more days in the week? Because if you just do it on one day, then maybe, I don't know, maybe there might be a problem on a Monday morning where it's a bit slow to start. So you might not produce as many, but then it gets better later on. So it's not necessarily representative of it. Right, last one then. Question 13 on this one. People are in 11. This simultaneous equations question. Okay. Ooh, right. Not great at simultaneous equation questions. So firstly, simultaneous equation questions generally look like this. Something x plus something y equals a number, right? That's what they usually look like. And then we kind of go from there. Now, if they don't look like that, you can do something to make it look like that. So what I'm going to do, oh God, it's not great, is it? Um, I'm going to, not nice, this question. I'm going to move this 2y to that side and move this 4 to that side. So that becomes 3x minus 2y on the right-hand side equals, and then this 4 becomes a minus 4. So I've just sort of swapped it all over. So it looks like that. With this one, what I'm going to do is add that 3y to the other side. So it's 2x add 3y equals minus 7, which means now it does look a little bit like that. You see what I mean? So sometimes you have to do these things in maths to make it look more familiar for you. Once you have got there, 3x minus 2y equals minus 4 and 2x plus 3y minus 7. Then you can sort of do what you would normally do in a simultaneous equation question. So what I would do is I would try to make these two numbers the same. So I'd make them both 6x by timesing that by 2 and timesing this by 3. So if I times the first equation by 2, I will get 6x minus 4y equals minus 8. If I times the second equation by 3, I'll get 6x plus 9y equals minus 21. Once they're the same, you can subtract these equations. Just be really careful when you're subtracting things if there's negative numbers involved. Somebody got more questions here. Why don't you do minus 3y and move it to the other? Why you don't do minus 3 and move it to and move 2x? You can do whatever you like. Nothing's wrong. There's no right way to do this. I was just trying to make it look like this. You may choose to do it a different way, but either way, if you do it correctly, you should still get the same answer. So if I now subtract these equations, do 6x take away 6x, you'll get 0. Minus 4 take away 9 is minus 13. And minus 8 minus 21 is minus 8 add 21. Use your calculator if you're not sure, which is 13. Which means that y is 13 divided by minus 13, which is minus 1. Regardless of which way you do it, you should get that answer. Otherwise, you've made a mathematical error, like got a minus or a plus the wrong way around and stuff. But if you do that, you should get that. Now that I've got y is minus 1, what I'll do is I'll go back to one of these equations. Let's say this one. Substitute this y equals minus 1 in. So 2 times minus 1 is minus 2. Then I'll rearrange this to find x. If I take away 4, I get minus 6 equals 3x. And if I divide by 3, minus 6 divided by 3 is minus 2, which means x is minus 2 and y equals minus 1 should be the answer to that question. I don't know what I can do. Depending on your calculator, by the way, you can actually, some calculators do simultaneous equations for you, which you perhaps did not know. X is minus 2 and y is minus 1. Works. Okay, I think that covers all of that for now then. Right. Okay. For those of you, I'll do the year 9 thing first, quite quickly. Okay. Oh no. Now, for those of you in year 9 who will have a test this weekend, things that I would recommend you know. Again, I'm not telling you the answers to things, but I'm just trying to tell you by looking at the test as I'm looking at it right now, the things to make sure you know. Well, um, in a plant, there are these cells that are specifically to do with moving substances around a plant. A bit like how in animals we have the blood, we have blood cells that carry things. In plants, we have these two cells called xylem and phloem. These two cells are used to carry substances around a plant. Xylem cells transport water up the plant because it always goes upwards. Phloem cells transport sugars or glucose around the plant once it's made. So remember, in photosynthesis, we're making glucose. Once it's made, the phloem is what transports them around. So xylem and phloem are things that move stuff around a plant. Um, you also need to make sure, and you probably did this if you came on Sunday, but you need to make sure you know what diffusion is. Because it's a definition that you might get asked, which is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. You basically want to say all of that stuff. Um, you should make sure you know the parts of the cells and what they do, like what does a mitochondria do? It is all about energy and respiration. You should remember what chloroplasts do, which is where the photosynthesis takes place in a plant. Yeah, that sort of stuff would be helpful, possibly. Um, that I'm not going to mention that. Oh yeah, cell organization. Okay. Cells are the smallest part of a living thing. Lots of cells make up a tissue. Lots of tissue makes up an organ, and lots of organs can make up an organ system. So it kind of goes smallest to largest as we go left to right here. Okay, so we go left to right. We're going from smallest to largest. Um, yeah. Um, disease. There are four types of pathogen. They are bacteria, virus, fungi, and protist. Um, and do make sure you know that one of these can be killed by antibiotics. And that is only this one here. Antibiotics only affect bacteria. They don't affect, if you've got a viral disease, they do not have any effect on that. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about drug testing. Again, this is applicable for everybody, possibly. Um, right. When we get a new drug, it goes through lots of a process before we can sell it to people or give it to people, sell it, but give it to people. The first thing we do is we test it on live animals. Well, not the first thing we do. We test it on live animals at one point. That's actually the second thing we do. Um, but then after that, what we do, once we tested it on animals, we now need to test it on humans first. And we test it on healthy volunteers first. There's a reason why we choose healthy people. It's because we want to see if it has any side effects on healthy people, but we do it on healthy volunteers. Right. I'm not going to tell you the answer to this, but I want to tell you that, as is often the case, you're going to get a question about vaccination, which is how a vaccination works, what it involves. That is usually a 4-mark question. Um, be prepared. Uh, okay. I don't need to tell you that. Right. A bit of chemistry. Um, don't need to know that. I need to know that. That's all. Nothing I can help you with that. Can't help you with that. Oh yeah. You did, not so long ago, a topic called organic chemistry. In organic chemistry, um, you learnt about these things called hydrocarbons, which are like CH, that sort of stuff, C2H6 and all these kind of things. Um, when we do this thing called fractional distillation of crude oil, which is where you get the oil out of the ground and then you put it through this process. And I think for those of you in year 10, I think you need to make sure you know that process of fractional distillation. We put it through a process of fractional distillation of crude oil. And at the end of that, what we get is like really short ones like this and really long ones as well. A bit like C10, or let's make it bigger, C20, H42. So we get short hydrocarbons and really long ones, like big numbers. Um, The big numbers are less useful to us, or the long hydrocarbons are less useful to us, which means that what we do with them is a process called cracking. Cracking turns these long ones into shorter ones. Now, one of the things that cracking involves is high temperatures. You need a high temperature to be able to crack a long hydrocarbon into a shorter one. The reason we do this cracking thing is because the shorter ones are more useful to us. Okay. Right. The rest of it is stuff that you should know, like make sure you know about protons, electrons, and neutrons, like the basic stuff and where they are in an atom. So I can tell you. Um, all of that is easy. I've already said that one. Yes, and one more thing on chemistry I'm just going to mention. Something called the difference between complete. You may not have done this, but I'm just going to tell you now, because then you have done it. Um, Complete combustion and incomplete combustion. Complete combustion, well, combustion in general means burning. And what do we burn? We generally burn some sort of fuel, don't we? Like a fossil fuel, like coal or something like that. So when we do complete combustion, you have a fuel and you burn it. And burning just means adding oxygen to it. That's what we do when you burn something. What you're doing is you're adding oxygen to it. You can't burn anything without oxygen. Now, when you have lots of oxygen, you get something called complete combustion. And what you get loads of heat energy, fine, but your waste products are carbon dioxide and water. So that's it. That's the only thing that happens if you burn something in lots of oxygen. But if you burn it in less oxygen, okay, so the equation is still fuel plus oxygen, but this time I'm going to put less in brackets to say there's less oxygen going on. Um, you get not only carbon dioxide and water, but you get another gas produced, and that gas is carbon monoxide, which is not great. You also get carbon, but you don't need to know that for now. But you'd remember that when you do incomplete combustion, there is something called carbon monoxide, which is also produced. Right, in the physics part of this, there's nothing else I can help you with for that. Um, you might have seen a lot of these questions before, by the way, so don't stress too much about it. Um, yeah, you're going to get a formula sheet. So you'll be able to do some equations. Remember, we had a lesson on equations and stuff like that. So there's going to be a couple of those. Just remember one thing. If you see a question, and you will, because I'm telling you, that says 0.3 kilowatts and you have to use it in an equation, you'll have the equation sheet. So don't worry about that. But if you see a number that says 0.3 kilowatts, then just remember you cannot put that into your calculator. You have to convert it to watts by timesing it by 1,000. If you times it by 1,000, you will get 300. That's the number that you need to use. Similarly, if you see 6 hours in a question, you cannot put the number 6 into the equation because equations do time in seconds, not in hours. So what you need to do is times that by 60 to get it into minutes, and then times it by 60 again to get it into seconds. So, oops. You're going to need to use 21,600 seconds in your equation. Okay, so I'm just trying to point out that one of the things that you have to look out for in any equation question is when they throw in time and stuff. Um, In the topic of electricity, were some circuit symbols. You will need to know your circuit symbols. Um, one more thing. There's two types of circuit. If I have two bulbs, there's two bulbs and they're connected together like this. We call that a series circuit. If I have the two bulbs connected a little bit differently, and by differently I mean like this, so there's like this extra branch going down. It's not like one rectangle, it's like lots of them. We call that a parallel circuit. Okay. Um, and this is generally better than a series circuit because if one thing breaks, the other stuff keeps working. And also, all of your components here get the maximum voltage from the battery, whereas in this one, the voltage gets shared. Another advantage is that you can put switches, you can control them separately. I think that's an easier one to remember. So you can put a switch for each component. That is an advantage of a parallel circuit. Um, Solids, liquids, and gases. I won't say anymore. Um, and what how they're different. Um, and then also one last thing, which is stuff on waves. Remember, there's an electromagnetic spectrum, which is a group of seven different waves, and they are radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. Um, you need to know them in their positions in that order because you may get given something where you've blanked out one or two of them and you have to fill it in. You also should know what these things are broadly used for. Um, that's what I'll say. Um, I think that's really it for that. I don't think there's too much more to say about that. Oh God, someone's written on this. Oh no. Oh, he's written on it. Okay. Okay, fine. I think that's probably it. In maths, I'm not going to say much about maths because there's not much you do. I'll just tell you briefly. There's a question on probability. There's some stuff on indices. You'll have a calculator that will help you. You need to make sure you can expand brackets that look a bit like this. Okay, where you've got that times that times that, and then this times this, and this times this. Be able to expand the brackets that look like that. Um, there is a difficult area question, which I might take out later, but we'll deal with that later. There's a solving an equation. Again, that I don't want to say much more than that, other than you need to solve an equation. Um, and I'm going to tell you this last question. Okay, this is going to be helpful. There is a question that basically looks very similar to this. This is the last one I'll do, then I'll move on to the other guys. It says, this thing simplifies to a x plus b. Now, when people see this, they see these a's and b's, and you have to work out what A and B are. Now, they see this question and think, I have no idea what to do. But really, you should, because most of the marks are just for expanding these brackets out and simplifying it. So you do 2 times x to get 2x, 2 times 16 to get 32, 4 times x to get 4x, 4 times minus 5 to get minus 20. You then add the x's together to make 6x. You add those together, 32 take away 20 is 12. You get to here. Now, I know that doesn't look like this yet, but you may realize that you can take a 6 out of this because 6 and 12 are both factors, and leave yourself with x plus 2 in brackets. And then it does look like that. You see what I mean? There's a 6 outside it, and there's a 2 inside it with the x. So that's one more right. That's it. If you're in year 9, I'm not doing anything else for you. Okay, for the year 10 students, I actually made this test today. So it's a little bit different to what you might have done on Sunday if you did some practice, but it's similar topics. Blood. So I'm switched back to biology suddenly. Blood. The blood is made up of four different components. They are red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and plasma. You need to make sure you know what each of these different types of things does. Um, which, see if anybody else anything else. So, example, red blood cells carry oxygen. White blood cells fight disease. Platelets are what help the blood to clot. They form blood clots. And plasma carries everything, essentially. Yeah, that stuff about the blood you may need to know. The differences between arteries, veins, and capillaries. I don't need to go into detail because you should have lots of notes about that, but differences between them. Arteries, veins, capillaries, I would recommend. Um, Communicable and non-communicable diseases. I'm going to tell you some of this actually. So, communicable and non-communicable diseases. Communicable diseases are ones that are caused by pathogens and therefore they can be spread from person to person. Um, Examples of communicable diseases include things like measles, salmonella, HIV, malaria. Okay. Non-communicable diseases, the main three examples that you should make sure you're aware of are cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Okay, they are the three sort of big things that, as far as GCSE goes, that you need to make sure you know that these are diseases that are non-communicable. They can't be spread from person to person. Again, some of these questions you will have seen before, I promise you, because they'll have been in our previous homeworks. That's why it's important to do our homeworks, because they reappear sometimes. Um, all of that is easy. Right. Digestion. There's a little bit of digestion on here. Um, there is, in fact, what I'll do is I'll open this up for everybody's benefit. There is a little table. Oh, oh, oh. Not there, not there, not there, not there. There, which essentially summarizes enzymes, what the three enzymes are, what they break down, what they break them down into, um, and where in the digestive system you find these enzymes. I made some of my students a couple of weeks ago write out this table, and then tested them on it and gave the winner £5 if they got it all correct. Anyway, um, so that's how important that is. Just to be clear, it's a really important thing to be familiar with and know really well. Then Oh, there's a random question on microscopes here, so I just want to tell you this. There are two types of microscopes in your GCSE syllabus: electron microscopes and light microscopes. Light microscopes are the ones that you are most familiar with, the ones you are likely to have used before in school, the one where there's millions of them in a school. They shine a light through the thing, and so you get, yeah, some image. Um, Whereas an electron microscope is just basically better. It's more expensive and more powerful. But what you need to make sure you use are the key terms, which are that they have a higher magnification. That means they can zoom in further, and a higher resolution, which means they produce a clearer image as well. So not only do they zoom in further, they produce a clearer image. Arteries, veins, capillaries. Again, I would just make sure you're familiar of that. There is a relatively easy question here about diffusion. I don't think you have to worry about it too much. And then there is a question about the villi and how they are adapted for absorbing food. Remember where the villi are? So your small intestine, there's tiny, tiny little structures called villi on the small intestine. What they do is they absorb food molecules when they're small enough and they've been digested. Um, you can often get questions about how these things are adapted for what they do. So you want to be able to remember the key things, which are that they have thin walls. Thin walls result in faster diffusion. Make sure you say that because you have to explain why. So saying they just have thin walls doesn't explain why does that allow them to absorb things quickly. Well, it's because it speeds up diffusion. You want to mention large surface area because there's so many of them. Again, what that does is speeds up the rate at which the diffusion happens, or you get more at once. You can also, that's probably enough actually, because you say the 2 points and explain it, but you can also mention a good blood supply because they have lots of blood going around them, and that's where the food ultimately needs to go. It has to be absorbed into the blood. That should cover you there. It's quite long, by the way, the year 10. I had to make it longer. That's why I added questions to it today, because I felt it was too short. You did a lesson reasonably recently about the nervous system, in which you did, well, I'm going to just quickly go over the summary that you need for this, which is that the nervous system is all about responding to changes in your environment. For example, if it's a bit hot or if somebody throws something at your face, you have to respond to these things. The change in your environment is called a stimulus. That's some sort of change, like the temperature's change or you touch something hot. These things are detected by receptors. You have receptors in your skin and around your body that are basically measuring that everything's okay. And if there's a problem, then they will constantly be sending electrical impulses to your brain. They send impulses to your central nervous system. They send it down a sensory neuron. That's the name of the nerve cell that sends impulses or carries impulses from the receptor to the central nervous system. The central nervous system sends messages to an effector. An effector is a muscle or a gland that carries out a response to whatever's happened. Like if someone throws something at your face, you need to move your shoulders or neck or whatever to move out of the way, and they carry out the response. Now, the impulses go from the central nervous system to the effector down a motor neuron. And then we have a third neuron that connects these two called a relay neuron. That information will form part of a relatively easy question. It's not a complicated question. It's just that. But also, I want to mention reflexes. A reflex is a fast automatic response. It's like, again, if you touch something hot, really hot, your hand will move away without you thinking about it. And that basically is important to keep you safe and prevent you from injury. That's why reflexes are really, really important. Okay, right, that's biology. Chem, history. You will get a little bit of stuff on covalent bonding. I don't think that's too difficult. There's a calculation question. There is a large question on, oh, well, this is quite a difficult question, but it's to do with the bond energy calculations. I made this today because I decided to do it all myself. Um, okay, bond energy calculations are when you get given, I'll show you actually a little bit. Um, you get given a table that looks a little bit like this, where they tell you some bond energies, and you get given an equation that looks like this. Right. And what you have to do in this question is work out what this bond energy is. They'll give you some more information. I've missed out something. They'll tell you something like that the energy released is bigger, is 93 bigger than the energy taken in. So what that means is to work out the overall energy change in this reaction, you do the total energy on the left-hand side, and you minus the total energy on the right-hand side because the right-hand side is a negative because it's losing energy. So what happens in a chemical reaction is we take in energy to break all of these bonds. The amount of energy we take in is told by this table. So to break this nitrogen NN bond, we'll need 945. To break this HH bond, we'll need this much energy, and there's three of them. So you'll have 3x basically. Um, and then on the right-hand side, we have got these NH, 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 which is 391, but there's three of them. And then it's doubled as well. Be careful of these, how many of these things there are. So there's actually six in total. There's six lots of 391. Now, that means that all of this equals, if I've told you that we've taken in or we've released 93 more energy than we took in, then it means that the overall energy change is minus 93. Be careful of that. It's a minus because you've released more than what you've taken in. So that means you overall have lost energy. So it's a minus number. And then there's a bit of algebra that you have to do to finish that off, which I'm not going to do. Um, you will also have to know a little bit about, if you remember these bond energy, these diagrams, like, I mean, this is really easy. Like that, for example, is what we use for an exothermic reaction. That is what we use for an endothermic reaction. Remember the labels on this kind of diagram? That's the energy of the reactants. That's the energy of the products. That's the activation energy. And this to here is the overall energy change. Okay, so do make sure you're comfortable with those things. There's a bit of early chemistry questions, but they're not easy questions. So for example, there's a question about ionic bonding. So if I gave you a compound like, I won't use the one that there's actual question here. If I said to you something like magnesium fluoride, if I said to you to explain how these react together, how do magnesium and fluorine react together to make magnesium fluoride, you'll have a periodic table. It'll tell you that that's in group 2 and that's in group 7. If something's in group 2, remember it means it's got two outer shell electrons. So to get a full outer shell, it loses 2. If something's in group 7, it means it needs to gain 1 to get a full outer shell. So you got to say these things. That gains 1, that loses 2. When magnesium loses 2 electrons, it becomes a 2 plus ion because it becomes positively charged. When fluorine gains an electron, it becomes an F minus ion because it becomes negatively charged. And then you need to explain that the oppositely charged ions attract. But to make this work, you need 2 of these for every one of these because only then do the charges cancel out. Then you get MgF2. That isn't the question you're going to get, but you have one similar to that. Also, in group 7 of the periodic table, as you go down, the elements get less reactive. You need to be able to explain why. I'm not going to go into why, but you do need to be able to explain why that happens. hydrocarbons. There's some easy stuff. I've already told you to make sure you know about fractional distillation of crude oil, and what it is. There is a test that separates alkanes and alkenes. I'm not going to go into what it is, but do make sure you know. And then there's some really easy stuff about the periodic table at the end. So I'm going to do that. So like protons, electrons, neutrons, their charges and stuff like that. I shouldn't need to um, talk about that too much. Um, right, physics. Um, God. There's a bit about energy stores and it's like kinetic energy and stuff and like what it is. It's really easy. There's an equations question. You get the formula sheet, so that's going to be really easy. Um, yeah, look out for units again. That's one thing I will say. Um, yeah, I kept the physics as easy as I could because it's just a lot of using equations, so it's quite easy. Um, oh, solid liquids and gases. Differences in terms of their particles, their arrangement, the energy, all that stuff. We've seen that kind of question in homework before. Um, ooh, that's a hard question. I'm not going to tell you about that. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one for you to deal with. There is stuff on that electromagnetic spectrum that I mentioned for the others. Um, and knowing that group of things, and there's a calculation. That's quite easy, the physics, to be honest. And then the maths, I can't really say much about the maths. I just made it to today quite randomly. The maths is basically made up of lots of quite short questions. There isn't anything that's like loads of marks. There's literally, I don't think there's anything more than like 2 marks in the whole thing. They're all like 1 mark, 2 mark questions, slightly weirdly. There's a 3 mark simultaneous equation question at the end. That should be fine. There's a little bit of trig stuff, which again you should be comfortable with. Um, the maths is actually quite easy, by the way. Genuinely, I made it quite long, but I made it quite easy. Um, most of it. There is nothing in here that should be challenging in the maths section. It is about as easy as it could be. They're all really, really short questions, and that can't really tell you much more other than Pythagoras trigonometry. Make sure you can answer trigonometry questions because there will be a few of those. Um, and there's a simultaneous equation at the end, which if you know, you can't really get it wrong. Right, that's it. Actually, there's nothing else to say. That's covers everybody, I think. Just so you all know as well, the few of you that are here, we will be doing one of these, probably not next week because you all have a test, so I don't see there's much point in doing that. We will do a couple more. We won't have one at the end of July. Basically, once your school's closed, we won't have these things because that's it. And then we'll close in August. Won't be exciting. Anybody got a question? Um, can I show how to do this? Okay, I can show you, but I wouldn't. I don't think it's help. I mean, it's helpful to check it, and it depends on your calculator. So someone's asked me how you do that simultaneous equation thing on a calculator that I showed you, but it is only specific calculators. I just want to make that really clear. Someone else said something. Um, is it all one? But yeah. So I know you haven't done one of our tests before. I don't think. It is one document. So one big document which has a little biology section, chemistry, physics, and then maths, all in one thing, which I appreciate is unusual, but it's the best way for us to get a lot done in a short amount of time. You will all have a verbal test as well, which I know some of you haven't experienced, but there will be a verbal test. Um, the simultaneous equation. So I'll just make it up, right? It doesn't really matter, does it? So if I said to you this question, 2x plus 3y equals 10, and then, I don't know, 4x plus y equals minus 8. I don't know. I don't know if this works, but we'll try. So if you have a particular calculator, just to be clear, it's not on every calculator. This one, which is slightly more advanced, but technically still allowed as far as GCSEs go, I don't recommend doing this, by the way. I'm telling you how to do it. I don't necessarily recommend it because you still need to know how to do this, and I'm sure you do. But if you want to check your answer, it is somewhat helpful. But I go into this menu. Um, Again, if you have the other, I mean, the cheaper calculator, I think that's best to say, then it will not have this function. But if you go down, you get to this thing that says, oh God, where has it gone? Equation slash function. If you go into that, it gives you two options: simultaneous equation, polynomial. Number one, simultaneous equation. It tells you how many unknowns. Now, as far as GCSE goes, you only have two unknowns, right? X and Y. So two. And then you see something, I'll make this bigger, that looks exactly like a simultaneous equation question where it asks you what is the number in front of the first X? 2. The number in front of the first Y? 3. The number at the end? 10. Then the number in front of the second row, the 4x, 1y minus 8. Press equals. and it'll tell you that X is minus 3.4 and Y is 5.6 in that question that I just made up. As I say, I don't highly recommend it. It's not that useful. I've hardly ever used it. Most of the time you need to show you're working out anyway, so it's okay to check something, but it's not that useful. Right. I think that's it. It's 8 o'clock. Yeah, good luck with it, the test. Yeah. All right, see ya.